Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Monday, the 28th of January, comes to you from London. And we saw quite a big dip in the dollar on Friday, putting it into bearish territory, and these short-term targets just kicking back in on the dollar index. So, quite interesting that we're turning bullish long-term, but short-term we've just pulled back again. So the dollar is a bit of a seesaw at the moment. Euro consequently broke above the Eurodollar, so we are seeing that looking stronger, although we do still have the downside target hanging over us here as well, and we are entering long-term bearish territory. The dollar down against the yen, and this is where we normally see it show itself first, and so we are just seeing the stronger yen being a factor there as a safe haven. Sterling looking stronger against the dollar, sitting at 132 after that fall on Friday. So sterling actually starting to have some short-term strength. We've got a couple of upside targets, 136 here as a target, but we still do have these big long-term targets hanging over us. So short-term upside, long-term downside. Against the euro, we're seeing sterling actually rocketed on Friday and starting to make a long-term transition. We want a few weeks above this, a few bars to be safe, but it is looking better. Against the Swiss franc, we're seeing sterling looking stronger as well. Against the Aussie dollar, also stronger. So sterling showing its strength since Friday. Bitcoin still lurches lower. And at the moment it's just hard to see the bottom here. The S&P 500 index looking stronger, up 0.85% on Friday, so we are seeing some, the US market did look a little bit better, Nasdaq also, and the Dow was up 0.75%, and the Russell 2000. These markets are all looking quite good short term, but medium term we're still below the cloud. The futures down this morning, the S&P 500 down 0.5%, the Nasdaq E-mini down 0.6%, does suggest that we'll open lower, although again the picture is similar to the cash markets. Short term bullish, medium term bearish, long term we're in a potential transition. Either we're finding support or we're changing to a bear trend. FTSE 100 is still is bearish below the cloud. Stronger sterling having a little bit of an impact here as well. Down 0.3% this morning. Bearish on all three time frames. So the UK market is still looking pretty bearish. We've got downside targets on the 60-minute chart. Some 2.5% to 3% lower. The FTSE 250 also down, but not quite as much. Less foreign exchange related. And we see here that it's still just holding its bull trend, but still bearish medium and short term. And still got this big downside target, some 25% lower on the mid caps long term. The DAX is down 0.3% this morning, but it's holding its short-term bullish trend. But it's really hard to call which way the DAX will go. We've got upside targets and downside targets. So at the moment, we've got a 2% upside target on the short term, 12% downside target on the medium term. So a very mixed picture here as well. But the trend is pretty clearly bearish on that medium term and long term chart. The CAC Courant, similar position, of course. We do have better upside targets here. The CAC Courant is looking pretty good short term. But we do still have downside targets hanging over this market as well. Japan down 2/3%. The Hang Seng was only slightly up, but very flat. The Shanghai Composite down very slightly, so not much change there. The Sensex in India down almost 1%, so we are seeing quite a fall away there. The Aussie market closed for the holiday, so the Australia Day holiday, so we don't have an update there. Brent Crude falling back below the $61 level, so short-term bearish. Got some short-term downside targets here as well. WTI, we're also seeing picture fairly mixed as well. US Nat Gas down 6%, back below that $3 level, so really giving up all the gains that we saw in November, December. So quite a big move there. Gold was rocketed above 1,300 on Friday, so the first time above $1,300 in a while. We can see here that was back to where we were really back in the summer, and we're moving back into a long-term bullish trend here on gold. So that jump looking pretty good. It's not clear where the next move is. We don't have any clear short-term downside targets, so upside targets, and the same in the medium term. So we'll need to watch for any new targets developing. Silver didn't really follow quite as much as gold, but it did jump on Friday as well. And again, we're short of clear targets there. US 10-year yields sitting lower, 275. So not much change there either. Taking a look, this data all coming from Thomson Reuters Icon, remembering this is my long-term, my medium-term, my short-term picture, or Metastock Zenith if you're running on Metastock. Here we're looking at Yahoo Finance, and we see the mixed picture in Asia. We see on Friday mostly green in the US, and this morning in Europe we're mostly down. Friday on the Nasdaq, the big performers were Western Digital up 7%, JD Sports up 7% as well, and Seagate, we saw some pretty big moves there. Apple up 3%, so we are seeing a lot of volatility. We're still seeing some pretty big moves here. Not enough to take Apple out of the woods, of course, so quite key that we might just be finding support on the lagging line with Apple, so we need to keep an eye on that. On the downside, we had Intel down 5%, so we are still seeing falls there on Friday. The Chinese market, as we said, is mixed. It was down slightly more, smaller amount of green than red. And if we look at the Indian market, the Nifty 50, the best performers here, Z Entertainment up massive 14% after a very big fall last week. So it's a little bit of respite. Bharti Infratel up 4%. Coal India up 2.3%, but again, terrible downtrend there. Looking on the downside, we had Adani Points down 10%, India Bulls Housing down 5%, has been a feature, just looking like it might have been a recovery, just falling away again, and Yes Bank, which we often see in these leaders as well, having had a terrible time, just retracing some of that, so not out of the woods yet. And here we see the live pricing coming in from Yahoo. Taking a look at Europe, we saw here, looking at the FTSE 100 this morning, we've got Ocado Group up 5%, Everaz up 3%, Rio Tinto up 2%. So we're seeing a little bit of recovery there in resources, and some of the retailers as well, M&S, and we're seeing here Next. So we are seeing some improvement, but generally speaking, the charts are still pretty bearish. On the downside for the FTSE, we've got Micro Focus down 2%. Imperial Brands also down, and the trend is still pretty clear. It's very hard to find anything that's looking great at the moment, so that's quite a challenge. FTSE 250, we've got TI Fluid Systems. They're up 5%, but they've had a terrible time over the last 12 months. And looking at Ferric, so also up this morning some 5%. Dixon's Carphone up nearly 3% this morning, so we are seeing an improvement there. And if we look at the downside, Premier Oil is the worst performer, down nearly 3%. Drax Group down 2.9%. So although we have had relatively good outperformance versus the Dow Jones Index on DAX, it's actually the better looking chart. But as we've seen so often, the better looking charts are the ones that are suffering when the market is trying to recover. Looking at the FTSE, the Eurostock 600, just ranking here, Ocado Group up 5%, so looking pretty good here. Massive outperformance on the Dow Jones Index this year, so looking pretty good there. We'll just see the run there that they had last year. Quite incredible. Kindred Group up 3%. And if we look at the downside, again we see these live prices coming in from Yahoo. Morphosis down 5%, and CYBG Group down 3%. So we are still seeing some pretty big falls on the market. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.